Hello there. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Right now, as you settle in, something extraordinary is happening in the world around you. In gardens and forests, on mountainsides and ocean shores, plants are quietly growing, breathing and communicating in ways we are only beginning to understand. They stand rooted and still, yet their lives are full of hidden dramas and astonishing abilities. They can send warnings through the air, share nutrients underground, and remember the stresses of seasons past. They breathe life into our planet, and in their presence we find both wonder and calm. Tonight, we journey into the secret world of plants. We will explore over 100 soothing facts about the Green Kingdom, from ancient trees older than civilizations, to flowers that trick insects with elaborate disguises, from seeds that wait centuries to bloom, to roots that reach deeper than buildings are tall. There is no test at the end, no rush, no urgency. Just the gentle unfolding of nature's most extraordinary secrets to carry you softly towards sleep. So let your breathing slow, let your thoughts grow quiet, and allow yourself to drift into the peaceful wonder of the plant kingdom. Welcome to Drowsy Discovery. I am glad you found your way here tonight. Perhaps you have had a long day. Perhaps you simply enjoy falling asleep to thoughts about the quiet miracles happening in the natural world. Either way, this space is for you. There is something deeply calming about contemplating the lives of plants. Every leaf, every root, every hidden chemical signal carries within it a story billions of years in the making. You are part of that story. The oxygen in your lungs was released by a plant somewhere on Earth. The food you ate today began as sunlight captured by green leaves. The air you breathe has been shaped and reshaped by forests for hundreds of millions of years. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is relax. So settle in. Let the weight of the day drift away, like leaves falling in autumn. And let us begin with the first of many peaceful truths about plants. The plant kingdom is patient beyond measure. Trees can live for thousands of years. Seeds can wait centuries for the right moment to germinate. Roots grow slowly through darkness, reaching toward water they cannot see. And through it all, plants shape our world in ways we rarely notice. Tonight, we will wander through this magnificent green world. We will meet trees that create their own weather. We will discover flowers that glow in the dark, and leaves that hide microscopic daggers. And we will uncover truths about plants that may surprise even the most curious minds. But there is no hurry. Plants have been here for hundreds of millions of years. They can wait a little longer while you rest. Let us begin with how plants communicate. Plants can communicate with each other through chemical signals in the air. When a plant is attacked by insects or other herbivores, it does not suffer in silence. Instead, it releases volatile organic compounds into the air, chemical messengers that drift on the breeze to warn neighboring plants of danger. These airborne signals can travel meters across a field or forest, reaching plants that have not yet been attacked. When the warning arrives, receiving plants begin preparing their defenses, ramping up the production of toxins, toughening their cell walls, or becoming less palatable to would-be attackers. This chemical communication system allows plants to share information without physical contact, creating an invisible network of warnings that helps entire plant communities respond to threats. Researchers have documented this behavior in species ranging from tomatoes to willow trees, suggesting that chemical communication is widespread across the plant kingdom. The air around a forest or garden is filled with messages we cannot hear, a constant conversation happening just beyond our perception. Trees share nutrients underground, through vast fungal networks. Beneath the forest floor lies a hidden world of connections that scientists have come to call the Wood Wide Web. Trees form partnerships with mycorrhizal fungi, allowing their root systems to link together through threads of fungal tissue finer than human hairs. Through these fungal networks, trees can share not only water and nutrients, but also chemical signals and even warnings about insect attacks. Larger, older trees, sometimes called mother trees, often share resources with smaller, younger trees growing in their shade, giving them a better chance at survival. Carbon, nitrogen and phosphorus flow through the network, moving from trees with abundant resources to those in need. The fungal connections can span entire forests, linking hundreds of individual trees into a single cooperative system. This underground economy challenges our understanding of forests as collections of competing individuals, revealing instead a community bound together by mutual aid. Plants release different warning signals depending on the type of threat. The chemical vocabulary of plants is remarkably sophisticated, with different combinations of volatile compounds conveying specific information about the nature of a threat. A plant attacked by caterpillars releases a different cocktail of chemicals than one being munched by aphids, and neighboring plants can distinguish between these signals and tailor their defensive responses accordingly. Some plants can even identify which species of insect is attacking them based on the saliva left behind in bite wounds. This specificity allows plants to allocate their limited defensive resources more efficiently, preparing exactly the right countermeasures for the threat at hand. The chemicals released by attacked plants can also serve as beacons for the enemies of their enemies, attracting predatory insects that prey on the herbivores currently feeding on the plant. This three-way communication system transforms the chemical warnings into calls for reinforcements, turning local predators into allies in the plant's defense. Some plants can detect the vibrations of insects chewing on their leaves. Recent research has revealed that plants are not deaf to the world around them, but can sense vibrations in ways that influence their behavior. When a caterpillar chews on a leaf, it creates vibrations that travel through the plant tissue, and some plants can detect these specific frequencies and respond by increasing their chemical defenses. Remarkably, plants seem able to distinguish between the vibrations caused by feeding insects and those caused by wind or other harmless disturbances. In experiments with Arabidopsis plants, researchers played recordings of caterpillar chewing sounds and found that the plants produced more defensive chemicals than those exposed to silence or wind sounds. This ability to sense and respond to acoustic vibrations adds another dimension to plant perception, suggesting that even without ears, plants are listening to the world around them in their own way. The quiet rustling of a feeding insect carries meaning in the plant kingdom. Stressed plants produce ultrasonic clicking sounds we are only just learning to detect. Plants under stress from drought or physical damage have been found to produce ultrasonic sounds, high-pitched clicking noises that fall outside the range of human hearing but can be detected with sensitive recording equipment. These sounds appear to be produced when air bubbles form and burst inside the water-conducting vessels of plants, a process called cavitation that occurs when the plant is struggling to maintain its water supply. Researchers recording stressed tomato and tobacco plants found that they produced tens of sounds per hour, creating an acoustic signature of distress that could potentially be monitored by other organisms. Whether other plants or animals can detect and respond to these sounds remains an active area of investigation, but the discovery has transformed our understanding of plant biology. The silent green world turns out to be filled with sounds we simply never knew how to hear. Leaves create tiny electric fields that bees can sense and respond to. Flowers and leaves carry small electric charges that create detectable fields in the air around them. Bees and other pollinators can sense these electric fields through their antenna hairs, using the information to assess whether a flower has recently been visited by another pollinator. When a bee lands on a flower to collect nectar, it temporarily changes the flower's electrical charge, and this change can persist for minutes, serving as a signal to other bees that the flower has been recently depleted. Flowers use their electrical properties to attract pollinators, with different species maintaining different charge patterns that may help bees identify them at a distance. The electrical communication between flowers and their pollinators adds yet another layer to the intricate relationships that bind the plant and animal kingdoms together. Even in the space between flower and bee, invisible forces are exchanging information. Roots use a form of sonar to navigate through the darkness of soil. Growing through the pitch-black world beneath the surface, plant roots somehow find their way toward water and nutrients, while avoiding obstacles and toxic zones. Research suggests that roots may accomplish this navigation by producing and detecting acoustic signals, clicking sounds that bounce off objects in the soil and return information about the surrounding environment. This root sonar allows plants to sense the location of water sources, rocks, and even the roots of neighboring plants without physical contact. Roots have been observed growing toward the sound of running water even when no moisture gradient is present, responding to the auditory signature of their target rather than chemical cues alone. The precise mechanisms of this acoustic sensing remain under investigation, but the discovery reveals that roots are not blindly groping through darkness, but actively probing their environment. The underground world is full of signals that roots have evolved to read. Sunflowers track the sun across the sky each day. Young sunflowers perform a daily dance, turning their flower heads from east to west as the sun moves across the sky, then resetting during the night to face east again in time for sunrise. This behavior, called heliotropism, is driven by differential growth on opposite sides of the stem, with cells on the shaded side elongating faster and causing the head to tip toward the light. The daily tracking increases the amount of sunlight the leaves can capture for photosynthesis, boosting growth rates compared to flowers prevented from moving. As sunflowers mature and their stems become woody and stiff, the tracking behavior ceases, and the heads permanently face east, a direction that warms them quickly in the morning and attracts more pollinators. The internal clock that drives this movement continues even when sunflowers are moved to constant conditions, suggesting that the plants have a genuine circadian rhythm. Sunflowers know what time it is and where the sun should be. Plants can detect the direction of gravity and grow accordingly. Every gardener knows that roots grow down and shoots grow up, but the mechanism behind this orientation is remarkably sophisticated. Plants sense gravity using specialized cells called statocytes, which contain dense starch granules that settle toward the lowest point of the cell, like tiny internal plumb bobs. When the plant is tilted, these granules shift position, triggering hormonal signals that redirect growth to compensate. This gravitropism ensures that seedlings push their shoots toward the sky and their roots toward the soil, regardless of how the seed happens to land. Astronauts have studied plant growth in microgravity and found that without a clear gravitational signal, plants become confused, growing in random directions until other cues like light can orient them. Gravity sensing is one of the most fundamental abilities plants possess, allowing them to establish proper architecture from the very first moment of germination. Some plants can sense the direction and force of wind and adjust their growth. Plants exposed to consistent wind grow differently from those in still air, developing shorter, stockier stems and stronger root systems that help them resist being blown over. This response to mechanical stress is called thigmomorphogenesis, and it begins with the plant detecting the repeated bending and swaying caused by wind. The mechanical signals trigger changes in gene expression that alter growth patterns, reinforcing structural elements and redirecting resources toward stability rather than height. Farmers and gardeners have long known that brushing or shaking young plants can produce similar effects, making them sturdier and more resistant to damage. The sensitivity to wind allows plants to adapt their growth to local conditions, producing tall, slender forms in sheltered locations and compact, robust forms in exposed sites. Every plant is essentially reading the wind and making architectural decisions accordingly. Certain flowers can smell approaching pollinators and respond in advance. Some flowers appear capable of detecting the chemical cues released by approaching pollinators and responding before the visitor even arrives. Research on evening primrose flowers found that they produced sweeter nectar within minutes of detecting the sounds or chemical signatures of approaching moths, essentially preparing a more attractive reward in anticipation of a visitor. The ability to sense and respond to pollinators before contact allows flowers to maximize the benefit of each visit, ensuring that arriving bees or moths find the richest possible nectar supply. This rapid response suggests that flowers are not passive participants in pollination, but active partners that adjust their offerings in real time. The chemical senses of flowers extend beyond detecting attacks to recognizing the presence of friends, creating a sophisticated sensory world within each petal and stamen. Trees can remember droughts and adjust their growth for years afterward. When a tree experiences severe drought, the stress leaves lasting marks not only in its growth rings, but in its physiology and behavior for years or even decades afterward. Trees that have survived drought often show modified water use strategies, keeping their stomata more tightly closed and growing more conservative root systems, even when water becomes abundant again. This drought memory helps trees prepare for future water shortages, trading some growth potential for increased resilience against the stress they have already experienced once. The memories are encoded in epigenetic changes, modifications to how genes are expressed, rather than changes to the genetic code itself. Young trees growing from seeds of drought-stressed parents sometimes inherit these preparatory adjustments, starting life already primed for water scarcity. The forests around us carry the memories of past climate events, their behavior shaped by experiences stretching back centuries. The Venus flytrap counts touches before deciding to snap shut. The Venus flytrap has evolved a remarkable counting mechanism that prevents it from wasting energy closing its trap on raindrops or debris. When an insect first touches one of the trigger hairs inside the trap, the plant registers the contact but does not close. Only when a second touch occurs within about 20 seconds does the trap snap shut, ensuring that the contact comes from a moving prey item rather than a falling leaf. But the counting does not stop there. The plant continues tracking touches after closure, and only when the prey struggles and triggers additional contacts does the trap seal completely and begin secreting digestive enzymes. This touch counting system demonstrates a form of short-term memory, with the plant storing and processing information about sequential events. The Venus flytrap remembers what happened seconds ago and uses that memory to make decisions about resource investment. Some plants can store the memory of touch for minutes or even hours. Beyond the Venus flytrap, many plants show evidence of retaining information about physical contact for significant periods. The sensitive plant, Mimosa pudica, famously folds its leaves when touched, but if touched repeatedly without harm, it gradually stops responding, a process called habituation that demonstrates learning. What is remarkable is that this learned indifference can persist for weeks, far longer than the immediate stimulus, indicating that the plant has stored a memory of its safe experiences. Researchers have shown that these memories can be specific to particular types of stimulation, with plants habituating to one form of touch while remaining responsive to others. The molecular mechanisms underlying plant memory appear to involve calcium signaling and epigenetic changes, similar to those involved in animal memory formation. Plants may lack brains, but they clearly possess some form of information storage and retrieval. Sensitive plants stop reacting to repeated harmless disturbances. The phenomenon of habituation in plants reveals a sophisticated ability to learn from experience and modify behavior accordingly. Mimosa pudica plants dropped repeatedly from a small height initially fold their leaves each time, but after many repetitions without harm, they cease responding and keep their leaves extended. This behavioral change is not due to exhaustion, because the plants still respond normally to new stimuli, like shaking or cutting. The plants have apparently learned that dropping is not dangerous, and adjusted their behavior to conserve the energy that leaf folding requires. When tested weeks later, the plants still remembered their training, demonstrating long-term retention of learned information. The capacity for habituation challenges traditional definitions of learning as something only animals can do, expanding our understanding of cognition to include organisms without nervous systems. Trees record lightning strikes and other events in their growth rings. The annual growth rings of trees serve as historical archives, recording not only the age of the tree, but information about conditions experienced during each year of growth. Lightning strikes leave characteristic scars in the wood, visible in cross-sections as disrupted growth patterns that can be precisely dated. Volcanic eruptions deposit chemical signatures that become incorporated into the rings, allowing scientists to date ancient eruptions by examining old trees. Frost damage, insect outbreaks, and even pollution events leave traces that trained dendrochronologists can read like a book. Trees that have lived for centuries contain within their trunks a detailed record of local and global events, serving as witnesses to history in a way no other organisms can match. Each ring is both a growth layer and a memory, preserved in wood until the tree falls or is cut and examined. Some seeds can remain dormant for thousands of years and still sprout. Seeds are nature's time capsules, capable of suspending life processes and waiting in a state of dormancy until conditions become favorable for germination. The record holders for seed longevity include date palm seeds, recovered from archaeological sites that germinated after 2,000 years, and narrow-leafed campion seeds that sprouted after being buried in Siberian permafrost for over 30,000 years. During dormancy, seeds maintain just enough metabolic activity to repair DNA damage and keep their cellular machinery ready for activation. The triggers that break dormancy vary by species and may include specific temperature patterns, light exposure, passage through animal digestive systems, or chemical signals from smoke or nearby plant roots. The ability to wait for the right moment to germinate is a profound survival strategy, allowing plants to bridge gaps in favorable conditions that might last far longer than any individual plant's lifespan. Lotus seeds have germinated after more than 1,000 years of dormancy. Among the most impressive examples of seed longevity are the sacred lotus seeds recovered from a dry lakebed in China, some of which successfully germinated after lying dormant for approximately 1,300 years. The lotus achieved this remarkable feat through a combination of an extremely hard, impermeable seed coat and specialized proteins that protect cellular structures during the long wait. Scientists studying these ancient seeds have identified repair mechanisms that remained functional even after a millennium, allowing the seeds to fix accumulated damage once dormancy was broken. The lotus plants grown from these ancient seeds appear healthy and normal, producing flowers indistinguishable from those of modern plants. The discovery reveals that with the right protective mechanisms, life can persist in suspended animation for periods that span the rise and fall of civilizations. Certain seeds travel by hitching rides on animal fur. Many plants have evolved seeds with hooks, barbs, or sticky coatings that attach to passing animals, using them as transportation to new locations. Burdock seeds, with their hooked bracts, famously inspired the invention of Velcro, after their clinging properties were observed under a microscope. These hitchhiker seeds can travel vast distances, potentially crossing barriers like rivers or roads that would block wind-dispersed seeds. The relationship between plant and carrier is generally one-sided, with the plant benefiting from dispersal while the animal merely tolerates the passengers until they are groomed off or fall away. Some seeds have evolved to target specific animals, with hook sizes and shapes optimized for particular fur types. The strategy is so successful that hitchhiker dispersal has evolved independently in dozens of plant families around the world. Some seeds can float across oceans and still germinate on distant shores. Coconuts are perhaps the most famous ocean travelers, capable of floating for months on seawater and washing up on distant beaches where they germinate and establish new palm groves. The coconut's thick, fibrous husk provides buoyancy and protects the seed inside from saltwater damage, while the liquid endosperm keeps the embryo hydrated during the journey. Other seeds adapted for ocean dispersal include those of mangroves, sea beans, and certain tropical vines, all of which have evolved waterproof coatings and the ability to tolerate extended immersion. These drifting seeds have colonized remote islands throughout the Pacific and other ocean basins, arriving long before any human vessels made the same journey. The pattern of island plant distributions reflects centuries of patient ocean voyaging by seeds that never gave up waiting for land. There are plants that shoot their seeds like tiny missiles. Some plants have evolved explosive dispersal mechanisms that launch seeds away from the parent plant at remarkable speeds. The sandbox tree, also known as the dynamite tree, produces seed pods that explode when ripe, hurling seeds at speeds approaching 70 meters per second and distances of up to 100 meters. The Mediterranean squirting cucumber builds up internal pressure until its fruit detaches and rockets away, spraying seeds in its wake. These ballistic dispersal systems are powered by tissue that swells or dries at different rates, creating tension that is suddenly released when a trigger threshold is reached. The evolutionary advantage is clear, as launching seeds far from the parent reduces competition and increases the chances of finding suitable germination sites. The quiet forest is punctuated by tiny explosions as plants fire their offspring into the world. Some seeds only germinate after passing through an animal's digestive system. Certain plants have evolved such close relationships with animal dispersers that their seeds cannot germinate without the scarification provided by passage through a gut. The acid and enzymes of the digestive tract wear away tough seed coats that would otherwise prevent water from reaching the embryo inside. Birds, bats, elephants, and countless other animals serve as mobile germination chambers, processing seeds while transporting them away from the parent plant. The extinct dodo bird was once essential for germinating the seeds of certain Mauritian trees, and after its disappearance, those trees stopped reproducing until the relationship was understood and artificial scarification was applied. Plants dependent on animal gut passage have bet their reproductive success on the continued existence of their animal partners, a gamble that usually pays off but can prove catastrophic if the disperser disappears. Certain seeds sprout only after fire has scorched the soil. In fire-prone ecosystems like the Australian bush, South African fynbos, and California chaparral, many plants have evolved seeds that require fire-related cues to germinate. Smoke contains chemicals called characins that stimulate germination in fire-following species, while heat from flames can crack open tough seed coats that would otherwise remain sealed. These fire-adapted seeds can wait in the soil for years or decades until a fire passes over, then germinate en masse in the nutrient-rich, competition-free conditions that follow. The post-fire landscape sees explosive growth as dormant seeds suddenly awaken, carpeting the blackened ground with green shoots within weeks. This strategy allows plants to exploit the window of opportunity that fires create before slower-growing competitors can become established. Fire, despite its destructive reputation, is actually essential for the reproduction of many plant species. Some carnivorous plants form traps filled with digestive liquid. Pitcher plants have evolved one of nature's most elegant traps, forming tubular leaves that fill with rainwater and digestive enzymes to create deadly pools for unwary insects. The rim of the pitcher, called the peristome, is often slippery when wet, causing insects that land on it to slide down into the liquid below. Once submerged, prey cannot climb the waxy walls, and eventually drowns, its body broken down by bacterial action and plant enzymes over days or weeks. Different pitcher plant species have evolved variations on this theme, with some producing larger traps capable of capturing small vertebrates like frogs and lizards. The pitcher's interior often hosts communities of organisms that help with digestion, from bacteria to mosquito larvae that thrive in the nutrient-rich liquid. The plant absorbs the resulting nutrients through specialized cells lining the inner walls, supplementing the poor nutrition available from the boggy soils where most pitcher plants grow. The Venus flytrap requires precisely 2 touches to trigger its snap. The famous snap of the Venus flytrap is one of the fastest movements in the plant kingdom, with the trap closing in less than 1/10 of a second once triggered. This rapid closure is accomplished through a combination of hydraulic pressure changes and the sudden release of stored elastic energy in the trap's curved walls. The 2-touch requirement prevents the plant from wasting energy closing on raindrops or wind-blown debris, ensuring that only actively moving prey triggers the energetically expensive response. Once closed, the trap forms a temporary stomach, sealing tightly and flooding with digestive fluids that break down the prey over the course of about 10 days. After digestion is complete, the trap reopens, and the dried remains of the insect blow away, leaving the trap ready for another meal. Each trap can only close and reopen a few times before it expires, and is replaced by new growth. Pitcher plants can grow large enough to trap small animals. The largest pitcher plants, particularly species of Nepenthes from Southeast Asia, produce traps large enough to capture not just insects but also small vertebrates like lizards, frogs, and even rats. Nepenthes raja holds the record for the largest pitchers, with some reaching over 35 centimeters in height and capable of holding more than 2 liters of fluid. The digestive liquid in these giant pitchers contains enzymes and bacteria capable of breaking down bone and cartilage, though the process takes considerably longer than for insect prey. Despite their meat-eating reputation, these large pitchers also form symbiotic relationships with certain animals, including tree shrews that feed on nectar from the pitcher rim and deposit their droppings directly into the trap, providing nitrogen-rich fertilizer for the plant. The boundary between prey and partner is surprisingly fluid in the world of carnivorous plants. Some plants use sticky hairs to trap and slowly digest insects. Some Sundews employ a different trapping strategy than pitcher plants, covering their leaves with hair-like structures called tentacles, each tipped with a glistening drop of sticky mucilage. Insects attracted by the sparkling droplets become mired in the adhesive, their struggles triggering more tentacles to bend toward the prey and secure it more firmly. The leaf itself may slowly curl around the trapped insect, maximizing contact between the prey and the digestive glands covering the leaf surface. Digestion occurs over several days as enzymes break down the soft tissues and the plant absorbs the nutrients. Unlike the snap traps of Venus flytraps, sundew tentacles can reset after each meal, continuing to function throughout the growing season. Some sundews are so effective at trapping insects that their leaves appear covered in the dried husks of countless small prey items. Carnivorous plants evolved in nutrient-poor soils where other sources of food were needed. The evolution of carnivory in plants is not random, but is strongly associated with environments where soil nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, are extremely scarce. Bogs, heaths, and sandy wetlands provide plenty of water and sunlight, but little nutritional support from the soil, creating conditions where the ability to capture and digest animals provides a significant advantage. The trapping structures of carnivorous plants are modified leaves that have sacrificed some photosynthetic capacity in exchange for nutrient acquisition, a trade-off that only makes sense when soil nutrients are genuinely limiting. Carnivorous plants transplanted to nutrient-rich soils often stop producing traps or produce fewer and smaller ones, demonstrating that the carnivorous habit is a response to specific environmental pressures. The evolution of plant carnivory has occurred independently at least a dozen times across different plant lineages, suggesting that when conditions are right, this remarkable adaptation is likely to evolve. Some plants defend themselves with sharp crystals hidden inside their tissues. Many plants produce tiny needle-like crystals of calcium oxalate, called raphides, that are stored in specialized cells within their leaves and stems. When an herbivore bites into the tissue, these cells burst, and the sharp crystals pierce the soft tissues of the mouth and throat, causing pain and swelling that discourages further feeding. The crystals are too small to see with the naked eye but can be felt immediately as a burning, stinging sensation. Dumcane, a common houseplant, gets its name from the temporary speechlessness caused by the swelling when its tissues are chewed. Rhubarb leaves contain such high concentrations of oxalate crystals that they are genuinely toxic to humans and should never be eaten. This invisible armory of microscopic daggers provides plants with an effective defense that requires no external cues to deploy. Certain trees drip sap so toxic it can blister human skin. The manchineel tree of Central America and the Caribbean is considered one of the most dangerous trees in the world, producing a milky sap that causes severe chemical burns on contact with skin. Simply standing under a manchineel during rain can cause blistering as the sap washes down with the water, and eating its apple-like fruits can be fatal. The tree's toxicity is so legendary that Spanish explorers called it Manzanilla de la Muerte, the little apple of death. Despite its dangers, the manchineel plays an important ecological role, stabilizing sandy beaches and providing habitat for wildlife immune to its toxins. Other toxic sap producers include the sandbox tree, whose sap can cause temporary blindness, and various euphorbia species cultivated as ornamentals despite their caustic latex. Some plants release caffeine into the soil to discourage rival plants. Caffeine, the stimulant many humans depend on for morning alertness, evolved in plants, not to wake us up, but as a chemical weapon against competitors and herbivores. Coffee plants, tea bushes, and certain other species release caffeine from their leaves and roots into the surrounding soil, where it inhibits the germination and growth of competing plants. This allelopathic effect creates zones around caffeine-producing plants, where other species struggle to establish, reducing competition for water, nutrients, and light. The caffeine also appears in the nectar of some plants, where it may create mild addiction in pollinators, encouraging them to return repeatedly to the same flowers. The dual function of caffeine as both defense and pollinator manipulator demonstrates the creative ways plants have adapted common compounds to serve multiple purposes. Grass releases a distinctive scent when cut as a chemical distress signal. The fresh, green smell of cut grass is not just a pleasant summer fragrance, but a chemical alarm call announcing damage and recruiting defensive assistance. The volatile compounds released when grass blades are severed, including a class of chemicals called green leaf volatiles, travel through the air to alert neighboring plants and attract predatory insects that prey on the herbivores responsible for the damage. This green scent is so strongly associated with plant distress that it is now understood as a universal signal across many plant families, not unique to grasses. The compounds also have direct antimicrobial and antifungal effects, helping to protect the wound site from infection. Every time a lawn is mowed, an invisible chemical drama plays out as millions of grass plants broadcast their distress into the surrounding air. Trees can release chemicals that stunt the growth of competing plants. Many trees engage in allelopathy, the release of chemicals that inhibit the growth of nearby plants, creating competitive advantages that extend beyond simple shading. Black walnut trees are famous for producing juglone, a compound that stunts or kills many plants that attempt to grow within their root zone. Eucalyptus trees release volatile oils that accumulate in the soil and prevent the germination of other species beneath their canopies. These chemical weapons can persist in the soil for years after the allelopathic plant has been removed, continuing to influence what can grow in the affected area. The evolutionary strategy makes sense where resources are limited, allowing the producing plant to monopolize water and nutrients by chemically excluding would-be competitors. Some plants produce toxins powerful enough to be used in medicines. The same defensive compounds that protect plants from herbivores have proven to be rich sources of medicines for treating human diseases. Digoxin, used to treat heart conditions, comes from foxglove, whose cardiac glycosides are potent enough to kill if consumed in quantity. The Pacific yew tree produces Taxol, now used as a chemotherapy drug, while willow bark provides the original source of aspirin. Approximately a quarter of all modern medicines have their origins in plant compounds, many of which evolved specifically to deter animals from eating the plants that produce them. The very toxicity that makes these compounds effective defenses also makes them pharmacologically active, interacting with animal physiology in ways that can be harnessed for medical benefit. The plant kingdom remains a largely unexplored pharmacy of potential new drugs. The corpse flower smells like rotting flesh to attract its pollinators. The Titan arum, commonly called the corpse flower, produces one of the largest and most spectacular flower structures in the world, rising over 3 meters tall when it blooms. But the most memorable aspect of this rare flowering event is the smell, a powerful stench of decaying meat that wafts through the surrounding air. This repulsive odor, produced by sulfur-containing compounds similar to those released by rotting carcasses, attracts carrion beetles and flesh flies that normally lay their eggs on dead animals. The insects crawl into the flower structure, expecting to find a meal, and end up covered in pollen, which they carry to the next corpse flower they visit. The Titan arum may wait years between blooms, storing energy in an enormous underground tuber, until it has enough resources to produce its spectacular and smelly reproductive display. Certain orchids trick insects by mimicking the scent of female bees. Some orchid species have evolved an extraordinary deception strategy, producing chemical signals that mimic the pheromones released by female insects seeking mates. Male bees or wasps, attracted by what they perceive to be the scent of a receptive female, land on the flower and attempt to mate with it. In the process of this pseudo-copulation, the insect picks up pollen packages that stick to its body and are transferred to the next flower it visits. The chemical mimicry can be remarkably precise, targeting specific pollinator species with exactly the right blend of compounds. Some orchids even time their flowering to coincide with the period when male insects are actively searching for mates, but females have not yet emerged. This exploitation of insect mating behavior ensures effective pollination without the orchid having to produce any nectar reward. Some orchids shape their petals to resemble the bodies of insects. Beyond chemical mimicry, many orchids have evolved visual deceptions that reinforce their sexual trickery. Bee orchids produce flowers with petals shaped and colored to resemble the bodies of female bees, complete with furry textures and eye-like markings. These visual signals, combined with chemical pheromone mimics, create convincing enough illusions that male bees repeatedly attempt to mate with the flowers. The hammer orchid of Australia takes the deception further, with a hinged lip that moves in the breeze like a beckoning female wasp. When a male lands on it and tries to fly away with his perceived mate, the hinge swings him against the flower's pollen structures. The elaborate artistry of these orchid deceptions demonstrates the power of evolution to craft intricate solutions to the problem of attracting pollinators. Flowers produce ultraviolet patterns invisible to humans but clear to bees. Many flowers that appear plain or uniformly colored to human eyes are actually decorated with striking patterns visible only to insects, whose vision extends into the ultraviolet range. These ultraviolet nectar guides often take the form of bullseyes, stripes or arrows that point toward the center of the flower where nectar and pollen can be found. Bees following these hidden signposts land in exactly the right position to contact the flower's reproductive structures, ensuring efficient pollen transfer. The patterns can change as flowers age, with freshly opened blooms displaying bright guides that fade after pollination has occurred, directing visitors toward flowers that still need their services. This invisible communication channel allows flowers to advertise effectively to their intended pollinator audience, while remaining inconspicuous to animals that might damage them. Certain flowers can launch insects into the air during pollination. The trigger plants of Australia have evolved a remarkable mechanism for ensuring that visiting insects pick up pollen. When a bee lands on the flower and probes for nectar, it triggers a sensitive column that swings rapidly around, striking the insect and depositing a load of pollen on its back. The motion is so fast that it can actually knock smaller insects off the flower entirely, launching them into the air with a coating of pollen to carry to the next bloom. The trigger mechanism resets after each activation, ready to strike the next visitor in exactly the same spot. This active pollen delivery system ensures that pollen ends up on the specific part of the insect's body most likely to contact the stigma of the next flower visited. The violence of the mechanism seems extreme, but it guarantees effective pollination rather than leaving the process to chance. Certain flowers generate their own heat to attract pollinators. Some plants, particularly members of the arum family, can generate significant heat within their flower structures, raising temperatures well above the surrounding air. The skunk cabbage can melt its way through snow when it blooms in late winter, maintaining internal temperatures around 20 degrees Celsius, even when the outside air is freezing. This thermogenesis requires enormous metabolic investment, but provides several benefits, including volatilizing fragrant compounds to attract pollinators, providing a warm shelter for visiting insects, and enabling activity during cold periods when few competitors are flowering. The sacred lotus keeps its flowers at a stable temperature throughout the day and night, creating a warm microclimate that may help pollinators remain active. Heat production in plants uses the same basic metabolic pathways as in warm-blooded animals, demonstrating that this ability has evolved independently in multiple lineages. Some flowers only bloom at night to attract moths. While most flowers open during the day to attract bees and butterflies, a significant number have evolved to bloom after dark, targeting moths and other nocturnal pollinators. Night-blooming flowers are typically white or pale-colored, making them visible in low light and often produce strong, sweet fragrances that carry through the night air. The moonflower opens its large white petals at dusk and releases a jasmine-like perfume that draws sphinx moths from great distances. Night-blooming jasmine, queen of the night cactus, and evening primrose all exploit this nighttime niche, avoiding competition with day-blooming species for pollinator attention. The switch to nocturnal pollination has evolved independently many times across different plant families, suggesting that the night offers reliable opportunities for those plants able to exploit it. The Rafflesia flower can grow over 3 feet across. The Rafflesia arnoldii of Southeast Asian rainforests produces the largest individual flower in the world, with blooms reaching over 1 meter in diameter and weighing up to 11 kilograms. Despite its enormous size, Rafflesia has no leaves, stems, or roots of its own, living instead as a parasite entirely within the tissues of rainforest vines. The flower is the only part of the plant ever visible, emerging from the host vine after months of development, to bloom for just a few days. Like the corpse flower, Rafflesia attracts pollinators with a smell of rotting meat, drawing carrion flies that carry pollen between blooms. The plant is so difficult to cultivate outside its native habitat that it remains relatively poorly studied, adding to its mystique as one of the botanical world's most extraordinary organisms. Some desert flowers bloom only once in decades after rare rains. In the driest deserts of the world, certain plants spend decades waiting as dormant seeds or bulbs for the rare rainfall events that allow them to bloom. When exceptional rains finally arrive, deserts can transform seemingly overnight into carpets of color, as long dormant plants race to germinate, flower, and set seed before the moisture disappears. These desert superblooms attract tourists from around the world, eager to witness landscapes that may not flower again for many years. The seeds produced during these brief windows of opportunity must be capable of extreme dormancy, waiting through decades of drought for the next suitable conditions. Some desert plants have evolved the ability to detect not just moisture, but the specific rainfall patterns that indicate enough water for successful reproduction, avoiding premature germination after insufficient rains. Certain plants bloom only once in a human lifetime before dying. Monocarpic plants, from the Greek meaning single fruit, flower only once in their entire lives before dying, investing all their stored resources into a single massive reproductive effort. Century plants, despite their name, typically bloom after 20 to 30 years, sending up a towering flower stalk that can reach over 10 meters before the plant exhausts itself and dies. Some bamboo species are monocarpic, living for decades before flowering simultaneously across entire regions, and then dying en masse. This strategy concentrates reproductive effort into a single overwhelming event that may saturate predators and ensure that at least some seeds survive. The dramatic death of these long-lived plants after flowering makes their blooms particularly poignant events, representing both the culmination and the end of decades of growth. Flowers sometimes bloom in synchrony across vast regions. Mass flowering events, where all plants of a species bloom simultaneously over large areas, represent one of nature's most spectacular displays of coordination. Mast years in forests, when oak or beech trees all produce heavy seed crops at once, are triggered by environmental cues that synchronize reproduction across thousands of trees. Bamboo forests that have grown for decades from a single original plant may flower simultaneously across countries, a genetic memory of their common origin expressing itself in coordinated bloom. These synchronized events serve several purposes, including overwhelming seed predators with more food than they can consume, and ensuring that pollen is available when stigmas are receptive. The cues that trigger synchrony, whether temperature patterns, rainfall, or day length, remain subjects of ongoing research. Some plants eject pollen explosively to reach pollinators. Certain plants have evolved mechanisms that launch pollen with remarkable force, ensuring that grains reach their targets even without direct pollinator contact. The white mulberry tree holds the record for the fastest known movement in the plant kingdom, with its stamens snapping forward in less than half a millisecond and catapulting pollen at initial speeds exceeding half the speed of sound. Bunchberry dogwood flowers explode when triggered, launching pollen upward at accelerations exceeding 800 times the force of gravity. These ballistic pollen delivery systems evolved to ensure that grains travel far enough to reach receptive stigmas, or to coat visiting pollinators thoroughly enough that some pollen survives the journey to another flower. The explosive mechanisms are often cocked by drying or by internal pressure buildup, releasing stored energy in an instant when triggered. Orchids produce the world's tiniest seeds, as small as dust. Orchid seeds are among the smallest in the plant kingdom, with some species producing seeds weighing less than a millionth of a gram. A single orchid seed pod may contain millions of these dust-like particles, each too small to see clearly with the naked eye. This extreme miniaturization allows orchid seeds to float on air currents for vast distances, potentially crossing oceans and reaching isolated islands. The trade-off for this dispersal advantage is that orchid seeds contain virtually no stored nutrients, making them entirely dependent on forming immediate partnerships with soil fungi to obtain the food needed for germination. This reliance on fungal partners explains why orchids are notoriously difficult to cultivate from seed, and why many species grow only in specific habitats where their fungal partners are present. Pine cones open and close depending on humidity. The scales of pine cones respond to moisture levels in the air, opening in dry conditions to release seeds and closing when wet to protect them. This hygroscopic movement is entirely passive, requiring no energy from the plant, and is driven by the differential expansion and contraction of different tissue layers within each scale. Dry weather conditions that favor seed dispersal by wind cause the cones to gape open, while wet conditions that would ground the winged seeds or encourage fungal attack cause them to seal shut. Some pine cones can cycle between open and closed states for years, gradually releasing their seeds over multiple dry periods. The mechanism is so reliable that it continues to function in cones that have fallen from the tree, automatically protecting seeds that have not yet been dispersed. Some plants recognize their own kin and grow differently around relatives. Plants can distinguish between the roots of strangers and those of genetic relatives, adjusting their competitive behavior accordingly. When the roots of unrelated plants meet, they often engage in fierce competition, allocating resources to root growth that helps capture contested soil territory. But when roots encounter those of close kin, the competition is often muted, with plants sharing space more peacefully and investing resources in reproduction rather than underground warfare. This kin recognition appears to be mediated by chemical signals released from root surfaces, though the exact mechanisms remain under investigation. The discovery challenges the assumption that plants are purely selfish competitors, revealing instead a more nuanced social life in which genetic relatedness influences behavior, plants can change sex depending on environmental conditions. Many plants are not permanently male or female, but can shift between producing male flowers, female flowers, or both, depending on their size, age, and environmental conditions. Jack in the Pulpit, for example, starts life as a male plant, but may become female as it grows larger and accumulates more resources. This sex switching allows plants to optimize their reproductive strategy, producing low-cost pollen when resources are limited, but investing in high-cost seeds when conditions are favorable. Environmental stresses like drought or shade can also trigger sex changes, pushing plants toward the less demanding male function. The flexibility of plant gender systems far exceeds what is possible in most animals, and represents yet another way plants adapt to variable conditions. Some desert plants have roots deeper than a 10-story building. In the arid regions of the world, access to water often means the difference between life and death, driving plants to extend their roots to remarkable depths. The shepherd's tree of the Kalahari Desert holds the record for the deepest known roots, reaching over 68 meters below the surface to tap into groundwater reserves far beneath the parched landscape. Mesquite trees in American deserts can send roots down 50 meters or more, drawing water from aquifers that other plants cannot reach. These extreme root systems represent enormous investments of energy and resources, requiring years or decades to develop fully. Once established, deep-rooted plants can survive droughts that kill their shallow-rooted neighbors, persisting through dry periods that may last years. Roots can grow upward to search for oxygen in flooded soil. While roots typically grow downward seeking water and nutrients, in waterlogged conditions where oxygen is scarce, some plants can produce specialized roots that grow upward instead. These pneumatophores, meaning breath carriers, emerge from the soil surface and function as snorkels, allowing gases to exchange between the air and the submerged root system. Mangroves are famous for their pneumatophores, which stick up from the mud of coastal swamps like thousands of vertical pencils, each one channeling oxygen down to roots buried in anaerobic sediment. Bald cypress trees of American swamps produce similar structures called knees, woody protrusions that rise from the water around the base of the trunk. The ability to breathe through specialized aerial roots allows these plants to colonize waterlogged habitats where other trees would suffocate. Mangrove trees filter salt out of seawater at their roots. Mangroves thrive in coastal environments where the water is often as salty as the open ocean, conditions that would quickly kill most plants. They accomplish this feat through specialized root membranes that filter out up to 90% of the salt from seawater as it is absorbed, allowing nearly fresh water to enter the plant while excluding the damaging ions. Some mangrove species also excrete excess salt through special glands on their leaves, where it crystallizes into visible white deposits. Others concentrate salt in older leaves that are then shed, carrying the accumulated salt away with them. These multiple salt management strategies allow mangroves to colonize habitats where few other plants can survive, creating unique coastal ecosystems that buffer shorelines and nurture marine life. Trees can pump water upward higher than a skyscraper. The tallest trees move water from their roots to their highest leaves against the pull of gravity, a feat that seems to defy physics given that pumps cannot lift water more than about 10 meters by suction alone. Trees accomplish this by using the evaporation of water from leaves to create negative pressure in the water column, essentially pulling water up through tiny tubes rather than pushing it from below. This transpiration-driven flow can lift water over 100 meters in the tallest coast redwoods, a distance equal to a 30-story building. The water column is held together by cohesion, the tendency of water molecules to stick to each other, which is strong enough to sustain the column without it breaking. This elegant system requires no moving parts or energy expenditure beyond what is needed to keep the stomata open for evaporation. some trees can regrow entirely from a single fallen branch. The regenerative abilities of certain trees allow them to establish new individuals from fragments that would simply rot in other species. Willows are particularly adept at vegetative reproduction, with fallen branches capable of rooting wherever they land and establishing new trees that are genetic clones of the parent. This ability is so pronounced that willow stakes used for fencing or riverbank stabilization often sprout and grow into living fences or hedgerows. Fig trees can similarly root from fallen branches, while some species produce adventitious roots from their branches while still attached to the parent tree. This capacity for clonal reproduction allows individual genetic lineages to spread across landscapes and persist for far longer than any single trunk could survive. Leaves have tiny pores called stomata that breathe in carbon dioxide. The surfaces of leaves are punctuated by thousands of microscopic openings called stomata, each surrounded by a pair of guard cells that can open or close the pore depending on conditions. When open, stomata allow carbon dioxide from the air to enter the leaf for use in photosynthesis, while simultaneously allowing water vapor and oxygen to escape. The balance between carbon dioxide uptake and water loss is a constant challenge for plants, since opening stomata for photosynthesis also risks dehydration. Different species have evolved different stomatal densities and control strategies depending on their habitats, with desert plants often having fewer stomata or keeping them closed during the heat of the day. A single leaf may contain millions of these tiny breathing pores, each one a gateway between the plant's interior and the atmosphere. Some plants have transparent leaves to capture more sunlight. In the deep shade of forest floors, where sunlight is scarce and precious, some plants have evolved leaves with transparent windows that channel light to photosynthetic tissues beneath. The aptly named window plants of South Africa grow mostly underground to avoid heat and herbivores, with only their translucent leaf tips exposed at the surface to admit light to the buried portions below. These crystalline windows are made of cells lacking chlorophyll, allowing light to pass through and illuminate the green tissues hiding beneath the soil. Other plants have evolved translucent spots or streaks in otherwise opaque leaves, creating internal light pipes that distribute scarce illumination throughout the leaf tissue. These adaptations allow plants to photosynthesize in conditions that would leave ordinary leaves unable to capture enough light. Leaves can angle themselves to avoid overheating in summer. Many plants can adjust the orientation of their leaves throughout the day, tilting them to optimize sun exposure in the morning and evening, while avoiding the harsh midday rays that could cause overheating and water loss. This solar tracking, called diheliotropism when following the sun, and paraheliotropism when avoiding it, is accomplished through changes in cell turgor pressure in the leaf stalks. Compass plants orient their leaves north-south, minimizing exposure to the intense midday sun, while maximizing capture of the gentler morning and afternoon light. Prayer plants fold their leaves upward at night in a behavior called nyctinasty, movements controlled by their internal circadian rhythms. These dynamic adjustments allow plants to maximize photosynthesis, while minimizing the risks of heat damage and water stress. Certain plants change leaf shape as they grow and mature. The leaves of a young sapling may look dramatically different from those of the same tree when mature, a phenomenon called heterophyly. Young English ivy produces lobed leaves adapted for climbing, but mature flowering shoots produce unlobed oval leaves suited for different functions. Australian eucalyptus trees produce round, waxy juvenile leaves positioned to capture light from above, then switch to elongated, pendulous adult leaves that shed light and heat in the canopy. Aquatic plants often produce different leaf shapes above and below the water surface, with submerged leaves being finely divided to maximize gas exchange, while emergent leaves are broader for efficient photosynthesis in air. This ability to produce different leaf forms allows plants to optimize their architecture for changing conditions as they grow. Leaves can change color not only in autumn, but in response to stress. The spectacular color changes of autumn leaves result from the breakdown of green chlorophyll, revealing underlying yellow and orange pigments, and sometimes triggering production of red anthocyanins. But leaves can also change color in response to stress at any time of year, signaling nutritional deficiencies, disease, or environmental damage. Nitrogen deficiency often causes leaves to turn pale green or yellow, while phosphorus stress can trigger purple or reddish tints. Viral infections may create distinctive mosaic patterns of light and dark green, while fungal diseases can produce brown spots or patches. Gardeners and farmers learn to read these color changes as diagnostic clues, using leaf appearance to assess plant health and identify problems before they become severe. Some aquatic leaves repel water completely using microscopic structures. The lotus leaf is famous for its ability to remain perfectly clean and dry even when submerged, a property now called the lotus effect. This superhydrophobicity is achieved through microscopic wax-covered bumps on the leaf surface that prevent water from spreading and force it instead to bead up into nearly spherical droplets. As these droplets roll off the leaf, they carry away dirt particles, dust, and fungal spores, keeping the surface immaculately clean without any effort from the plant. Scientists have used the lotus leaf as inspiration for self-cleaning materials, developing coatings and surfaces that mimic its microscopic architecture. The lotus effect demonstrates how studying plant adaptations can inspire human technologies. Some plants can survive being completely frozen for months. In the harshest polar and alpine environments, plants face temperatures that would instantly kill most organisms, yet many have evolved remarkable freeze tolerance. Arctic willows, cushion plants, and various mosses and lichens can survive having their tissues frozen solid for months at a time, entering a state of suspended animation until warmth returns. They accomplish this by producing antifreeze proteins that prevent ice crystals from growing large enough to rupture cell membranes, and by moving water out of their cells so that ice forms in less damaging intercellular spaces. When temperatures rise, these frozen plants thaw and resume normal metabolic activity within hours, as if nothing had happened. Some Antarctic mosses have been revived after being frozen for over 1,500 years, demonstrating that the frozen state can preserve life almost indefinitely. Cacti can live for hundreds of years with minimal water. The saguaro cactus of the Sonoran Desert can live for over 200 years, growing slowly to heights of 12 meters or more, all while surviving on the meager rainfall of one of Earth's driest regions. Cacti achieve this longevity through a combination of water storage, reduced surface area, and specialized photosynthesis that allows them to keep their stomata closed during the day when water loss would be greatest. The thick, waxy skin of cacti prevents water from evaporating, while their shallow but extensive root systems can capture moisture from even light rains. After a good rain, a large saguaro can absorb hundreds of liters of water, storing it in its spongy interior tissues to sustain the plant through months or years of drought. The slow growth rate of cacti reflects their conservative water use, trading speed for the resilience needed to survive in unpredictable desert environments. Some desert plants collect water straight from fog. In coastal deserts where rain is extremely rare but fog is common, some plants have evolved to harvest moisture directly from the air. The Namib desert beetle has become famous for this ability, But plants like the welwitschia and various desert succulents employ similar strategies. Their leaves or stems are covered with structures that cause fog droplets to coalesce into larger drops that then run down to the soil or are absorbed directly through the leaf surface. Some plants position their branches and leaves to maximize fog interception, creating shapes that function as natural fog catchers. This ability to extract water from humid air allows plants to survive in places where the last rainfall may have been years or decades ago. Desert plants often store water in swollen stems or roots. Succulents, the storage of water in thickened plant tissues, is one of the most common adaptations to arid environments. Succulents store water in their leaves, stems, or roots, creating internal reservoirs that can sustain the plant through extended dry periods. The baobab trees of Africa store so much water in their massive trunks that elephants will break them open to drink during droughts. Smaller succulents like stonecrops and living stones pack water into compact, rounded forms that minimize surface area and reduce water loss. The stored water often contains mucilaginous compounds that help retain moisture and prevent it from being lost too quickly during droughts. This internal water supply allows succulents to remain metabolically active during dry periods when other plants are forced into dormancy. Some desert plants reflect sunlight with silvery hairs to stay cool. Many desert plants have evolved pale reflective surfaces that bounce sunlight away rather than absorbing it, keeping their tissues cooler than they would otherwise be. White hairs, waxy coatings, and silvery scales all serve this reflective function, creating a kind of natural sunscreen that protects delicate cells from heat damage. The brittlebush of American deserts produces progressively more reflective leaves as conditions become drier and hotter, adjusting its appearance to match environmental demands. Some plants also fold or angle their leaves to present smaller profiles to the midday sun, further reducing heat absorption. These cooling strategies allow desert plants to remain active at temperatures that would force less adapted species to shut down. Certain mosses can survive complete dehydration for years. Some mosses and related plants can lose virtually all of their cellular water and enter a state of suspended animation called anhydrobiosis, surviving in this desiccated condition for years or even decades. When water becomes available again, these resurrection plants rehydrate within minutes to hours, returning to full metabolic activity as if they had merely been sleeping. The mechanisms that protect cellular structures during desiccation include the production of specialized sugars and proteins that replace water in stabilizing membranes and enzymes. Tortula ruralis, a common moss, can survive repeated cycles of desiccation and rehydration, essentially pausing and restarting its life depending on moisture availability. This remarkable tolerance for dehydration allows desiccation-tolerant plants to colonize environments where water availability is unpredictable. The tallest trees grow taller than 30-story buildings. The coast redwoods of Northern California include the tallest trees ever measured, with the current champion, named Hyperion, standing at over 115 meters. These giants require centuries to reach such heights, growing slowly but steadily in the foggy coastal environment that provides them with moisture year-round. The limiting factor for tree height appears to be the physics of water transport, with the upper leaves receiving progressively less water as the column stretches ever higher. At their maximum heights, redwoods rely on fog absorption through their upper canopy to supplement the water their roots can provide. Standing at the base of a coast redwood and looking up, the top disappears into the mist, a living tower that has been growing since before many nations existed. Some trees can clone themselves for tens of thousands of years. While individual tree trunks may live only centuries, some species can persist as clonal organisms for far longer, by repeatedly sprouting new trunks from ancient root systems. The Pando Aspen Grove in Utah, consisting of over 40,000 genetically identical trunks connected by a single root system, is estimated to be at least 80,000 years old, and may be the oldest living organism on Earth. Each individual trunk lives only a century or so, but as old trunks die, new ones sprout from the roots, maintaining the organism's continuous existence. This strategy of clonal immortality allows genetic lineages to persist through conditions that would kill any individual plant, creating living connections to the ice ages and beyond. The oldest known tree is nearly 5,000 years old. High in the White Mountains of California, bristlecone pines grow in conditions so harsh that few other plants can survive. Yet it is precisely these difficult conditions that allow individual bristlecone pines to reach ages approaching 5,000 years, making them the oldest known non-clonal trees on Earth. The cold, dry environment slows growth to a crawl, but also protects the trees from the rot, insects and fires that limit tree lifespans in more hospitable climates. The oldest bristlecone, named Methuselah, germinated when the Egyptian pyramids were being built, and has been growing ever since. These ancient trees carry within their rings a record of nearly 5 millennia of climate history, serving as living archives of conditions long before any written records. Trees can live for thousands of years, older than entire civilizations. The longevity of some trees places them in a category of existence that exceeds anything we can easily comprehend. Yew trees in European churchyards may predate the churches themselves by centuries. Baobabs in Africa have stood since before written history began on that continent. Olive trees in the Mediterranean still bear fruit from roots that were alive when ancient Greece flourished. These ancient trees have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the migrations of peoples, and the complete transformation of human society, all while standing rooted in the same spot. They connect us to the deep past in a tangible way that no artifact can match, living bridges to times beyond human memory. Some trees store more carbon than entire forests of smaller plants. The largest individual trees can contain hundreds of tons of carbon locked in their wood, more than entire hectares of younger forest. A single giant sequoia can contain over 1,000 tons of above-ground biomass, representing carbon that will remain stored for as long as the tree stands. The carbon storage capacity of forests depends not just on tree cover, but on the size and age of the trees present, with old-growth forests storing far more carbon per hectare than younger plantations. Protecting existing large trees may be more effective for climate mitigation than planting new ones, since the planted trees will take centuries to reach equivalent carbon storage. Every ancient tree is also a carbon vault, holding centuries of accumulated atmospheric carbon in solid form. The Amazon rainforest produces about 20% of the world's oxygen. The vast green expanse of the Amazon basin, stretching across 9 countries and covering over 5 million square kilometers, is sometimes called the lungs of the Earth. Through photosynthesis, the trees and plants of the Amazon convert carbon dioxide into oxygen on a scale that significantly affects atmospheric composition. However, the forest also consumes much of the oxygen it produces through respiration and decomposition, with the net contribution to atmospheric oxygen being debated among scientists. What is unquestionable is the Amazon's role in regulating global climate, recycling water, and storing billions of tons of carbon that would otherwise warm the atmosphere. The forest creates its own weather, releasing moisture that falls as rain hundreds or thousands of kilometers inland, sustaining ecosystems far beyond its own boundaries. Trees can create rain by releasing water vapor into the atmosphere. Through the process of transpiration, trees move enormous quantities of water from the soil to the atmosphere, where it can condense into clouds and fall as rain. A single large tree can release several hundred liters of water into the air each day, and a forest collectively can generate enough moisture to influence regional weather patterns. In the Amazon, more than half of the rainfall originates from water recycled by the forest itself, with transpiration feeding the clouds that water the trees in a self-sustaining cycle. Forests can also influence where rain falls, with deforestation potentially reducing rainfall in downwind regions that depend on forest-generated moisture. This biotic pump effect means that forests are not passive recipients of climate, but active participants in creating the conditions they need to thrive. A single oak tree can support thousands of different species. Oak trees are keystone species in many temperate ecosystems, supporting extraordinary biodiversity through the habitats and resources they provide. A mature oak can host hundreds of species of insects, from leaf-eating caterpillars to bark-dwelling beetles, along with the birds and mammals that feed on them. The acorns produced by oaks provide critical food for deer, squirrels, jays, and wild boar, while the tree's bark, branches, and hollows offer shelter for bats, owls, and countless invertebrates. Fungi form partnerships with oak roots and break down fallen wood, while mosses and lichens colonize bark and branches. The fallen leaves enrich soil communities of bacteria, fungi, and invertebrates that process organic matter and cycle nutrients. An individual oak tree functions as an entire ecosystem in miniature, supporting a web of life that depends upon its presence. The world's largest living organism is a fungus connected to trees. The honey fungus Armillaria ostoyi in Oregon's Blue Mountains holds the record for the largest known organism by area, spreading across nearly 10 square kilometers of forest floor. This vast fungal network connects trees throughout the forest, feeding on both living and dead wood, while forming underground highways that can transport nutrients between distant points. The fungus is estimated to be thousands of years old, having spread slowly but relentlessly through the forest over millennia. While Armillaria can be destructive, killing trees by attacking their roots, it also plays important roles in forest ecology by decomposing dead wood and recycling nutrients. The discovery that a single organism could span such an enormous area challenged assumptions about the limits of biological individuality. The Amazon releases clouds of fragrant chemicals that influence weather. Above the Amazon canopy floats an invisible haze of volatile organic compounds released by trees and other vegetation. Chemicals that include the isoprene and terpenes responsible for the forest's distinctive fragrance. These biogenic emissions interact with the atmosphere in ways that can influence cloud formation and rainfall patterns. The organic compounds provide nuclei around which water droplets can condense, potentially increasing cloud cover and precipitation over the forest. The scent of the rainforest is not merely perfume but a chemical influence on regional climate, part of the complex feedback system that allows the forest to maintain the conditions it needs to survive. Scientists studying the Amazon atmosphere have found that biological emissions can be the dominant source of cloud-forming particles during certain seasons. Some trees can withstand fire and regrow from ashes. Fire-adapted trees have evolved remarkable mechanisms to survive blazes that would kill other species. Cork oaks produce thick, insulating bark that protects their living tissues from heat, allowing them to survive even intense fires and resprout from apparently charred trunks. Australian eucalyptus trees often have epicormic buds hidden beneath their bark that sprout new growth within weeks of a fire passing through. Some eucalyptus species have even evolved to encourage fire, producing highly flammable oils that help blazes spread and eliminate competing species less able to survive. The relationship between fire-adapted trees and the fires they survive is an evolutionary dance that has shaped landscapes for millions of years. Certain plants require fire to crack open their seed coats. Serotinous cones found on many pines and other fire-adapted conifers remain closed and full of seeds for years, until heat from a fire melts the resin, sealing them shut. This fire-triggered release ensures that seeds are dispersed at exactly the right moment, when competition has been eliminated and nutrient-rich ash covers the soil. The lodgepole pine of North America depends entirely on fire for reproduction in many areas, with sealed cones accumulating on trees for decades until a blaze opens them all at once. The post-fire environment, with its abundant light, reduced competition, and nutrient-rich soil, provides ideal conditions for the mass germination of these long-waiting seeds. Volcanic ash eventually creates some of the most fertile soils on Earth. The devastating power of volcanic eruptions gives way, over time, to remarkable fertility, as volcanic ash and lava weather into some of the richest soils on Earth. Volcanic soils are typically high in phosphorus, potassium, and other minerals essential for plant growth, with a porous structure that promotes drainage and root penetration. The fertile slopes of volcanic islands like Hawaii, Java, and Sicily support lush vegetation and productive agriculture despite, or rather because of, their volcanic origins. Pioneer plants that colonize fresh volcanic substrates begin the slow process of soil building, their roots breaking down rock, and their decaying tissues adding organic matter. The transformation from barren lava to productive farmland can take centuries, but demonstrates nature's capacity for renewal after even the most destructive events. Pioneer plants are the first to colonize barren lava fields. When fresh lava cools and solidifies, it presents one of the most challenging environments for plant establishment, lacking soil, nutrients, and the ability to retain water. Yet certain hardy plants, called pioneers, have evolved to colonize these barren substrates and begin the long process of ecosystem development. In Hawaii, the ohia tree is often the first to appear on new lava flows, its tiny seeds able to germinate in minute cracks where enough moisture accumulates. Lichens and mosses may arrive even earlier, their ability to extract minerals directly from rock, allowing them to establish on surfaces completely inhospitable to higher plants. Over decades and centuries, these pioneers modify the environment, trapping dust, producing organic matter, and creating conditions that allow other species to follow. Grasslands once covered more than a third of Earth's land surface. Before the expansion of agriculture and human settlement, grasslands and savannas covered vast areas of every inhabited continent, supporting enormous populations of grazing animals and the predators that fed on them. The Great Prairies of North America, the steppes of Asia, the pampas of South America, and the savannas of Africa all represented variations on the grassland theme, dominated by grasses rather than trees. Grasslands typically develop in regions too dry for forests but too wet for deserts, often maintained by fire and grazing that prevent woody plants from taking over. Many grassland ecosystems have been converted to agriculture, their rich soils proving ideal for growing cereal crops. But remnant patches preserve the biodiversity and ecological processes that once characterized these landscapes. Leaves can trap bubbles of air to help aquatic plants float. Many floating aquatic plants maintain their position at the water surface through air-filled chambers in their leaves or stems that provide buoyancy. Water hyacinth, one of the world's most invasive aquatic plants, uses spongy, air-filled leaf stalks to keep its rosettes of leaves floating on the surface, where they can capture sunlight. Duckweed, the world's smallest flowering plant, floats as tiny green dots on pond surfaces, each individual containing air pockets that keep it buoyant. These air chambers serve multiple functions beyond flotation, also facilitating gas exchange in tissues that would otherwise be surrounded by water. The ability to float at the water surface gives aquatic plants access to the abundant sunlight and atmospheric carbon dioxide available above the water, while keeping their roots submerged in the nutrient-rich water below. Trees in swamps grow roots above ground to breathe. In waterlogged swamps and marshes, where soil oxygen is severely depleted, trees have evolved specialized structures that allow their roots to breathe. Bald cypress trees produce distinctive knees, woody projections that rise from submerged root systems and extend above the water surface. These knees are thought to facilitate gas exchange, allowing oxygen to reach the submerged root tissues that would otherwise suffocate. Mangroves produce pneumatophores, finger-like roots that point upward from the mud and function as snorkels, drawing in air that is then transported to buried root tissues. The remarkable appearance of these aerial root structures, rising like fingers from swamp water, demonstrates the creative solutions plants have evolved to colonize challenging aquatic environments. The Amazon floods forests where fish pollinate plants. During the annual flood season, the Amazon River rises by many meters, inundating vast areas of surrounding forest and creating a unique flooded forest ecosystem called Igapo. Fish swim among the submerged tree trunks and branches, feeding on fruits that fall into the water and dispersing seeds throughout the flooded forest. Some fish species have even taken on the role of pollinators, visiting underwater flowers and transferring pollen between plants. This fish-pollinated plant, Myakka fluviatilis, lives entirely underwater during flood season and depends on fish to carry pollen between its submerged flowers. The flooded Amazon forest represents one of the most unusual pollination systems known, demonstrating that the boundaries between aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems can be remarkably fluid. Some plants can grow without soil, directly in air or water. Epiphytic plants, including many orchids, bromeliads and ferns, grow attached to tree branches and trunks without any contact with soil. These air plants obtain their nutrients from rainwater, dust, and decaying organic matter that accumulates around their roots, rather than from the ground below. Spanish moss, despite its name a flowering plant rather than a true moss, drapes from trees throughout the American South, absorbing moisture and nutrients directly from the humid air. Tillandsia species in deserts survive on fog moisture and atmospheric dust alone, their specialized leaf scales capturing water directly from humid night air. These soil-free plants demonstrate that with the right adaptations, plants can colonize surfaces and environments that would seem entirely unsuitable for growth. Bamboo forests can reduce noise pollution like natural sound barriers. The dense growth of bamboo creates effective barriers against noise, absorbing and scattering sound waves that would otherwise travel through open environments. Bamboo plantings are increasingly used as living sound barriers along highways and around industrial facilities, providing noise reduction comparable to artificial barriers, while also offering aesthetic and ecological benefits. The hollow stems of bamboo resonate at specific frequencies, absorbing sound energy and converting it to mechanical vibration, rather than allowing it to pass through. The dense foliage further scatters sound waves, creating zones of relative quiet behind bamboo screens. This natural sound buffering capacity adds to the many practical uses of bamboo, one of the fastest growing and most versatile plants known. Some vines climb by feeling nearby surfaces with sensitive tendrils. The tendrils of climbing plants are exquisitely sensitive to touch, capable of detecting contact with potential support structures and responding within minutes by coiling around them. This thigmotropic response is triggered by mechanical stimulation of the tendril surface, which causes differential growth that bends the tendril toward the stimulus. Once contact is established, the tendril coils tightly around the support, then often forms a spring-like helix along its length that acts as a shock absorber, allowing the vine to sway in wind without breaking. Passion flower tendrils are among the most sensitive, responding to contact with weights as light as a few milligrams. The speed and precision of tendril response allows vines to secure themselves to supports before they are dislodged by wind or their own increasing weight. Strangler figs wrap around host trees until they eventually die. Strangler figs begin life as epiphytes, their seeds germinating in the branches of host trees after being deposited by birds or bats. The young fig sends roots down toward the ground, while simultaneously wrapping its branches around the host trunk, gradually encasing it in a living lattice. As the fig grows and its roots reach the soil, it becomes increasingly independent of its host, eventually shading out the host's leaves and constricting its trunk until the host tree dies and rots away. What remains is a hollow fig tree standing where the host once was, a living sculpture formed around the shape of its former support. Despite their destructive reputation, strangler figs play important ecological roles, providing food and shelter for wildlife throughout their long lives. The Rafflesia has no leaves, stems, or roots of its own. The parasitic Rafflesia plant, producer of the world's largest flower, represents an extreme example of plant reduction. It exists as nothing more than tissue threads within the body of its host vine, invisible until the moment when it produces its enormous, foul-smelling flower. Without chlorophyll, leaves, or any photosynthetic capacity, Rafflesia depends entirely on its host for water, nutrients, and the energy to produce its massive blooms. The genetic analysis of Rafflesia has revealed extensive gene loss and transfer, with some genes apparently acquired from its hosts through horizontal gene transfer. This plant has evolved so far toward parasitism that it retains almost nothing recognizable as plant-like except for its flowers and the seeds they produce. Some trees have branches that grow fused together like living bridges. In the wet forests of northeastern India, local Khasi people have learned to guide the aerial roots of rubber fig trees across streams and gaps, training them to fuse together into living bridges that can support human foot traffic. These living root bridges can span gaps of over 50 meters and may last for centuries, actually strengthening as they grow older rather than decaying like wooden or rope bridges. The roots are trained by being threaded through hollow beetle nut trunks that guide their growth, and over years they fuse together into solid, walkable structures. Similar root fusion occurs naturally in many fig species, creating networks of interconnected branches and aerial roots that form complex three-dimensional structures. These living bridges represent a remarkable collaboration between human ingenuity and plant biology. Walking palm trees slowly shift position toward sunlight over years. The walking palm of Central and South American rainforests produces stilt roots that radiate from its trunk several feet above the ground, giving it an appearance of walking on multiple legs. According to local legend, these palms can actually walk, slowly shifting their position through the forest in search of sunlight by growing new roots on one side, while abandoning old roots on the other. Scientific evidence for actual walking is disputed, but the palm does appear able to adjust its position modestly over time by extending roots in preferred directions. The stilt roots provide stability on steep slopes and allow the palm to remain upright, even if the soil beneath its original position is washed away. Whether or not they truly walk, these palms represent one of the most unusual growth forms in the plant kingdom. Trees can sleep at night, folding their branches slightly downward. High-precision laser scanning of trees over 24-hour periods has revealed that many species lower their branches and leaves by small amounts during the night, raising them again as morning approaches. Birch trees, for example, may droop their branches by up to 10 centimeters overnight, a movement so subtle it had never been documented until modern measurement techniques made it visible. This nocturnal relaxation appears to be driven by the tree's internal circadian rhythm and changes in water pressure within the branches, rather than by direct responses to light or temperature. The discovery that trees have daily cycles of movement adds to the growing appreciation that plants are more dynamic than their sessile nature might suggest. In their own slow way, trees keep time and adjust their posture throughout the day. Some plants fold their leaves when touched. The sensitive plant, Mimosa pudica, is famous for its rapid leaf-folding response to touch, with entire leaflets collapsing within seconds of being disturbed. This thigmonastic movement is driven by rapid changes in cell turgor pressure, as water is pumped out of motor cells at the base of each leaflet, causing the structure to go limp. The response travels along the leaf, with sequential leaflets folding like dominoes as the signal spreads. Why the plant evolved this dramatic response remains debated, but hypotheses include startling herbivores, exposing thorns on the stem, appearing wilted and unappetizing, or simply shaking off insects. The movement is remarkably fast for a plant, comparable to animal reflexes, and has made mimosa a popular subject for scientific research into plant behavior. Evergreen trees produce antifreeze proteins to keep their leaves year-round. While deciduous trees drop their leaves to avoid winter damage, evergreens maintain their foliage through the coldest months by producing compounds that protect their cells from freezing. These antifreeze proteins and other cryoprotectants prevent ice crystals from forming within cells, where they could rupture membranes and kill the tissue. The waxy coating on evergreen needles also helps prevent water loss during winter, when frozen soil makes it difficult for roots to replace lost moisture. The energy saved by not having to regrow leaves each spring is balanced against the ongoing cost of maintaining and protecting the leaves through winter. Evergreen and deciduous strategies each have advantages depending on climate and growing conditions, explaining why both approaches persist in the plant kingdom. Bamboo flowering is so rare it can take more than a century. Some bamboo species grow vegetatively for many decades, spreading through underground rhizomes and producing new culms each year without ever flowering. Then, after intervals that can exceed 100 years, all plants derived from a single original individual flower simultaneously, set seed and die. This mass flowering and death, called masting, occurs synchronously across all clones of a particular bamboo lineage, regardless of where they are growing in the world. Bamboo planted from the same stock in different continents has been observed to flower at the same time, suggesting that the flowering trigger is internal rather than environmental. The evolutionary advantage of such long flowering intervals may lie in seed predator satiation, with the rare, massive seed production overwhelming the ability of animals to consume all the seeds. Some plants can photosynthesize through their stems instead of leaves. Cacti and other stem succulents have shifted photosynthetic function from leaves to their green stems, an adaptation that allows them to minimize water loss while still capturing sunlight. The thick, fleshy stems contain chlorophyll and perform photosynthesis while simultaneously storing water, combining multiple functions in a single structure. Some cacti have evolved flattened, leaf-like stem segments that maximize surface area for light capture, while retaining the water storage benefits of stem tissue. In extreme cases, Like the photosynthesizing stems of horsetails or green desert brooms, leaves have been reduced to tiny scales or lost entirely, with stems assuming all photosynthetic duties. This flexibility in organ function demonstrates that plants are not bound by rigid anatomical rules, but can reassign functions as ecological circumstances demand. Bananas are technically berries, but strawberries are not. The botanical definition of a berry is a fleshy fruit that develops from a single ovary and contains seeds embedded in the flesh, and by this definition bananas qualify perfectly as berries. The banana flower's single ovary swells into the familiar yellow fruit, with the tiny seeds visible as the dark specks running through the flesh of wild bananas. Strawberries, on the other hand, are accessory fruits, with the fleshy part developing from the receptacle rather than the ovary, and the true fruits being the tiny seed-like achenes studding the surface. Other surprising berries under the botanical definition include grapes, tomatoes, and even avocados, while raspberries and blackberries are actually clusters of tiny drupes rather than true berries. The disconnect between botanical and culinary definitions creates a delightful confusion that reveals how complex fruit classification really is. Some plants taste differently depending on the soil they grow in. The concept of terroir, familiar from wine production, describes how the specific characteristics of soil, climate, and place influence the flavor of plants grown there. Grapes from different vineyards produce wines with distinctly different flavor profiles, even when grown from identical vines, because they absorb different mineral combinations from different soils. Tea, coffee, chocolate, and many other plants show similar terroir effects, with connoisseurs able to distinguish products from different regions by their taste. The minerals and trace elements absorbed through roots make their way into plant tissues, subtly altering biochemistry and the balance of flavor compounds. Terroir reminds us that plants are intimately connected to the specific ground they grow in, their flavors literally shaped by the earth beneath them. Plants invented photosynthesis more than 2 billion years ago. The evolution of oxygenic photosynthesis by cyanobacteria over 2 billion years ago was one of the most transformative events in Earth's history, eventually filling the atmosphere with oxygen and enabling the evolution of complex life. Modern plants inherited their photosynthetic machinery from cyanobacteria through an ancient symbiotic event, when a eukaryotic cell engulfed a photosynthetic bacterium that eventually became the chloroplast. This endosymbiotic origin explains why chloroplasts have their own DNA and resemble bacteria in many ways, remnants of their free-living ancestors. The basic chemistry of photosynthesis has remained remarkably stable over billions of years, with modern plants using essentially the same molecular machinery as their ancient ancestors. Every green leaf is a direct descendant of those original photosynthetic pioneers that first began capturing sunlight. Bamboo can grow almost a meter in a single day. The growth rate of bamboo is legendary, with some species capable of extending their culms by nearly a meter in a single 24-hour period under optimal conditions. This extraordinary speed is possible because bamboo culms are already fully formed in miniature within the ground before they begin their rapid elongation. The cells are all present. They simply fill with water and expand to their final size in an explosive growth spurt. Bamboo can be heard growing in quiet forests, the sound of cells stretching and tissues creaking as the culm races skyward. This rapid growth has made bamboo one of the most useful plants for sustainable construction and materials, since a harvested stand can regenerate within a few years rather than the decades required for timber trees. Some plants produce natural rubber or latex as a defense. The milky white latex produced by rubber trees, dandelions, and many other plants is a defensive secretion that coagulates when exposed to air, gumming up the mouthparts of insects and sealing wounds against infection. The para rubber tree, Hevea brasiliensis, produces the commercially important natural rubber that has been harvested for centuries, though many other species produce similar compounds. Latex is stored under pressure in specialized cells called laticifers, which can form extensive networks throughout the plant body. When a leaf or stem is damaged, the latex flows to the wound site and quickly solidifies, creating a physical barrier and often delivering toxic or irritating compounds directly to the attacker. The rubber industry depends on this plant defense mechanism, tapping latex from carefully made incisions without killing the trees. Trees can trap bubbles of ancient air inside amber. Amber, the fossilized resin of ancient trees, sometimes contains tiny bubbles of air that were trapped when the resin oozed from tree bark millions of years ago. These microscopic gas bubbles preserve samples of ancient atmospheres, allowing scientists to analyze the composition of air from prehistoric times. Studies of amber bubbles have revealed that oxygen levels were sometimes much higher in the past than they are today, potentially explaining the giant insects that lived during certain periods. The resin that becomes amber was produced as a defensive response to insect attack or injury, the same sticky protective secretion that modern conifers still produce. Each piece of amber is a time capsule from an ancient forest, preserving not just insects and plant fragments, but the very air those forests breathed. Ancient ferns dominated Earth before flowering plants appeared. For over 100 million years before the first flowers bloomed, ferns and their relatives ruled the plant kingdom, covering the land in vast green forests that looked very different from those of today. These ancient fern forests created the coal deposits that power much of human civilization. Their accumulated organic matter transformed over geological time into fossil fuel. Ferns reproduce through spores rather than seeds, a more primitive strategy that nonetheless proved remarkably successful for hundreds of millions of years. Even today, ferns remain abundant in forest understories and tropical regions, filling ecological niches that flowering plants have not completely taken over. The tree ferns of New Zealand and Tasmania offer glimpses of what ancient forests might have looked like, their frond-crowned trunks rising from misty forest floors. Mosses were among the first plants to colonize land. The first plants to venture onto dry land from their aquatic ancestors were simple, non-vascular organisms, similar to modern mosses and liverworts. These pioneer land plants lacked the sophisticated water transport systems of later plants, and could only survive in moist environments where they could absorb water directly through their tissues. Despite their simplicity, mosses were ecological innovators, beginning the process of soil formation that would eventually allow more complex plants to follow. The descendants of those first colonizers still blanket rocks, logs, and forest floors around the world, contributing to soil development and moisture retention wherever they grow. Mosses represent a living link to the earliest stages of plant evolution, when the Green Kingdom first began its conquest of the continents. Ancient trees once grew near the South Pole. During warmer periods in Earth's history, forests extended to latitudes that are now covered by ice, with fossil evidence of diverse temperate and even tropical forests in Antarctica and the high Arctic. These polar forests grew during extended periods of darkness and continuous summer light, conditions that modern tropical trees could not tolerate, suggesting that ancient polar trees had adaptations we do not fully understand. Fossil logs, leaves, and pollen found in Antarctic rocks reveal forests of southern beech, conifers, and ferns that flourished when the continent was warmer and positioned differently on the globe. The existence of ancient polar forests reminds us that Earth's climate has varied dramatically over geological time. and that ecosystems have repeatedly adapted to conditions very different from those of today. Some algae blur the line between plant and animal life. Euglena and other mixotrophic organisms possess both chloroplasts for photosynthesis and the ability to ingest food particles like animals, defying simple classification as plant or animal. These organisms can switch between autotrophy, making their own food from sunlight, and heterotrophy, consuming organic matter from their environment, depending on conditions. The existence of such intermediates suggests that the boundary between plants and animals is not as sharp as it might appear, with both kingdoms sharing common ancestors that may have possessed both feeding modes. Modern mixotrophs thrive in a wide variety of aquatic environments, taking advantage of their metabolic flexibility to survive where specialists might struggle. The evolutionary history of photosynthesis is complex, with chloroplasts having been acquired and sometimes lost multiple times across different lineages. Plants produce more oxygen than all ocean algae combined in some regions. While marine phytoplankton are often credited with producing much of the world's oxygen, terrestrial plants remain enormously important oxygen sources, particularly in forested regions. The dense vegetation of tropical rainforests produces massive quantities of oxygen through photosynthesis, though much of this is consumed by the forest's own respiration and decomposition. The net oxygen contribution of forests to the atmosphere is debated, but their role in removing carbon dioxide and storing carbon is beyond dispute. Both terrestrial plants and marine phytoplankton are essential components of Earth's oxygen cycle, together maintaining the atmospheric composition that makes complex life possible. The green world, whether on land or sea, breathes life into our planet. Some plants can survive in boiling hot springs. Thermal pools and hot springs, with temperatures that would quickly kill most organisms, nonetheless host specialized algae and cyanobacteria that have evolved to tolerate extreme heat. These thermophilic photosynthesizers can survive and reproduce in water hotter than 80 degrees Celsius, creating colorful mats around the edges of hot springs and geysers. The proteins of these heat-loving organisms are specially adapted to maintain their structure and function at temperatures that would denature ordinary biological molecules. Studying these extremophiles has revealed much about the limits of life and the adaptations necessary to survive in hostile environments. The vivid colors of hot springs like those in Yellowstone National Park are created by communities of these heat-tolerant organisms, each species contributing its own pigments to the rainbow display. Certain plants change the acidity of the soil they grow in. Some plants actively modify the soil chemistry around their roots, releasing compounds that alter pH and make nutrients more available for uptake. Acid-loving plants like azaleas and blueberries can acidify the soil over time, creating conditions favorable for themselves while making life difficult for competitors. Nitrogen-fixing legumes change soil chemistry by adding nitrogen compounds through their root nodule bacteria, enriching the soil for future plants. These soil modifications can persist long after the plants that created them are gone, leaving chemical legacies that influence which species can grow in an area. The ability of plants to engineer their own soil environment demonstrates that they are not passive inhabitants of their ecosystems, but active shapers of the conditions around them. Some plants produce edible roots weighing hundreds of pounds. The cassava and sweet potato plants that feed billions of people produce storage roots containing starch accumulated over months of growth, but some plants produce even more massive underground structures. The giant taro of Polynesia can produce corms weighing over 70 kilograms, enough to feed an entire extended family from a single plant. Yams in West Africa can grow to similar sizes, with record specimens exceeding 100 kilograms. These enormous storage organs represent the plant's investment in survival, banking energy and nutrients underground, where they are protected from fire, drought, and many herbivores. The cultivation of root and tuber crops has sustained human populations throughout the tropics for thousands of years, providing reliable calorie sources where grain crops are difficult to grow. Trees in cities grow faster but die younger than those in forests. Urban trees often grow at accelerated rates compared to their forest counterparts, responding to the warmth of cities, elevated carbon dioxide levels, and abundant nitrogen from pollution. However, this rapid growth comes at the cost of shortened lifespans, with urban trees typically dying decades before their country cousins. The stresses of urban life, including compacted soils, limited root space, pollution and physical damage, take their toll, even as growth rates increase. Heat islands created by pavement and buildings push urban trees to their thermal limits, while salt, from winter road treatment, poisons many urban soils. The accelerated life cycle of urban trees means that cities must constantly replant to maintain their tree cover, a costly ongoing investment in green infrastructure. Some plants glow faintly at night under the right conditions. Bioluminescence, the production of light by living organisms, is rare in plants but does occur in certain fungi that associate with plant roots, and in a few specialized cases. Certain tropical plants have been observed to glow faintly, though whether this is true bioluminescence or delayed fluorescence remains debated. Scientists have also engineered plants to glow by inserting genes from bioluminescent organisms, creating glowing tobacco plants, and more recently trees that could theoretically replace streetlights. The metabolic pathways that produce light in nature require significant energy investment, which may explain why self-luminescent plants are so rare in the wild. The dream of streets lined with softly glowing trees remains speculative, but research continues into the possibility of creating plants that light up the night. And now the quiet wonders of plants begin to gently fade into the stillness of the night. You have wandered through over 100 peaceful truths about the Green Kingdom. From roots that whisper underground to trees that stand older than civilizations. From carnivorous plants that trap insects to seeds that wait centuries for the perfect moment to bloom. You have explored how trees communicate through hidden fungal networks, how flowers deceive pollinators with elaborate disguises, how leaves sense the world around them, and roots navigate through darkness toward water they cannot see. You are part of this story. The oxygen in your lungs was released by a plant somewhere on Earth. The air you breathe has been shaped and reshaped by forests for hundreds of millions of years. Every breath you take has been touched by the quiet chemistry of leaves. If your eyes feel heavy now, let them close. Let the rhythm of your breath become steady, like the gentle sway of branches in a quiet breeze, like the slow pulse of sap rising through ancient wood. Tonight, as you rest, plants continue their quiet work. Roots are spreading through darkness. Leaves are breathing in the moonlight. Somewhere in a distant forest, a flower is unfurling in the cool night air, and seeds are waiting patiently for their moment to grow. You are a small, warm presence within this vast green world, peacefully resting among the wonders. Sleep well, sweet dreams. And may you carry with you the quiet knowledge that plants have been shaping our world for hundreds of millions of years, and will continue their patient work long after the last thought of the day has faded into peaceful darkness. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the secret world of plants. If you enjoyed this video, Please subscribe to Drowsy Discovery for more soothing explorations of nature's quiet wonders. There are more wonders waiting, more secrets hidden in leaves and roots, more gentle truths to drift through on quiet evenings. Rest well, and may the patient presence of the green world keep you company through the night. This has been Drowsy Discovery. Good night.